It's frustrating and stressful. 40 million people are in the dark about whether or not student loan payments will resume. Hello and welcome to the Neighborhood Money Podcast, a video podcast here to help you build the life you deserve. I'm Cavan, that's Drew.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk all about student loans. Drew, do you remember how for the last 2-ish years, a little over 2 years now, student loans just haven't been a thing, at least for the federal student loans? People just have not been paying them.
Yeah, actually, I kind of forgot about it. I thought they resumed for some reason, like almost a year and a half ago. And when I was flipping through CNBC on my phone, just looking at articles, this one popped up. I clicked into it. It was like pretty interesting. So, like, as the intro of this episode went, is loan payments, I guess on paper, say that they will be resuming here in about 2 weeks at pretty much the end of August. But I think as we go into this episode, we'll probably show that that may not be the case.
So maybe a little history background for those people out there that don't have student loans, that are fortunate enough to not have student loans. Through the pandemic, when COVID hit, the federal government said, hey, we're going to put a pause on any student loan payments to give relief to people that were losing jobs, potentially getting furloughed, which means you're just not working for an extended period of time, and just hardships that come with that type of environment. Well, those payments were supposed to resume, and then they extended them, and they did that same process, Drew. I'm not really even sure how many times it's been now. You kind of lose track, but it's been over 2 years where payments on federal student loans just have not been a thing. Again, as a way to provide help for people that are struggling with the pandemic. We'll probably get into it later in the episode, whether or not, those types of things should still be around. But that's in the current state of the student loan. And like you said, Drew, in 2 weeks, the student loans are supposed to resume again. And this article that from CNBC, and we won't actually walk through the article all that much, but it states that people are just really stressed about it because, one, there's been very limited communication from the Biden administration on whether or not they're going to resume student loans, whether or not they're going to extend out the student loans, or they're going to cancel any amount of student loans. And so people aren't prepared for it. But then actually the servicing companies that help service these loans aren't prepared for them either. And so it's kind of a huge mess. And hopefully better communication comes out. Drew, I think you kind of alluded to this, that more than likely, because there has not been communication, they're probably going to extend it out again. But I think in this episode, Drew, we can give some of our thoughts on if they do resume student loan payments, what can the listener do to help prepare themselves and then get those loans out of their life as fast as possible. And then, Drew, I think we'll just go back and forth after we talk about that, just talk through like what are our thoughts on student loans, on this extension of no payments, and even on student loan debt cancellation in general.
So, kind of going into this article a little bit, I mean, we don't have to go too deep into it, but one of the things that was the reason why I sent this over to you, it was they have somebody they interviewed or asked a question about this pausing of the student loans, or if it's going to resume or not. And in here he quotes saying, it's just been radio silence from the Biden administration. It's just really frustrating and stressful because, and it says here that he doesn't know if he'll have the usual cash he needs for his healthcare expenses, and recently inflation with higher grocery bills. So when I saw that coming out from, somebody's personal life, the first thing that popped in my mind is they've been now living a certain way for the last 2 years without their student loans in mind. And I think for a lot of people, it kind of like scares me a bit, because I think a lot of people have been doing that. So people are saying kind of forgot they had student loans. They've been living a certain way. And, as we were saying, this was more or less to kind of help you get by. And it was like if you got laid off or furloughed, and it was supposed to just help you make it to the next month. But now I think it's been now taken advantage of, and people have saying, "Oh, I have this extra cash over that I've normally been putting towards student loan," and they've been spending it on things maybe they don't need, and they haven't been as cautious with it or actually saving up maybe that emergency fund. So when these do resume, they do actually have that cash on hand. And as this one, this is anecdotal, as this one person that's they interviewed in here, but it kind of sounds exactly that for this person is they say they don't know if they have enough cash left over, and it's probably because they've been spending that money on things other than just their living expenses.
At the end of the day, it's essentially has become a crutch for a lot of people that if it's taken away, people are going to fall. And that's really scary for a lot of reasons, obviously. But you're totally right. And we don't have the data to back up the fact that people are not being smart with their money. But generally from, these anecdotal articles, and there's plenty of them out there, trust me. And there are some studies that state how ready people are. It is a scary time for those people that do have student loans, because if you have built a lifestyle now over the last 2 years, it's hard to find two, three, four, all the way up to 1,000, even 1,500 if you have a super high amount of loans, just in a couple of weeks. And so I think regardless of what the administration does, whether they push it off or they resume payments, I think right now is a really good time if you have student loans to sit back and say, okay, if it does happen, play that scenario out. If it does happen, can I find $500 per month so that I can start making payments and without it going into delinquency, or default or any of those types of things that happen when you don't pay your loans off. I think that's a really good place to start right now, regardless of the decision from the administration.
Yeah, and kind of going into getting yourself ready for this, it's also something, talking about delinquencies. It was another side of this story too that I found interesting was that, not only does the individual have to prepare for these loans maybe starting up again, but it's also those lenders. And I guess I never thought of the lender side of it. And if they don't really know what's going on, they're not prepared for this, they will get a huge amount of people calling in and overwhelming these places of saying like, why am I delinquent or I can't pay for this? We need to go on a payment plan. And they're going to get so overwhelmed that they aren't going to be able to handle this situation either. So I think that part's pretty interesting about this article. And then, kind of going on as we alluded to earlier, they had like the Secretary of Education or something like that. And they're pretty much saying that because of the radio silence and nobody's been prepared and it's within 2 weeks, that there is a pretty good possibility that this gets pushed back once again. But all in all, as we're saying, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. But I don't even know if that's like the best. This
Yeah,
is kind of funny to say that.
I agree that you prepare for the worst, but there's really nothing to hope for, right? Because at the end of the day, they're your student loans and you're going to have to pay them back. Yes, of course, the administration can come out and cancel student debt for a subset of the population, for the entire population. Who's to say what actually is going to happen? But I think at the end of the day, they're your loans. So you have to be prepared now to resume those payments. And I think, Drew, a really good spot to start is, again, just going back to your budget and saying, okay, can I find the amount of money I need to pay at least the minimum of my payment plan on these loans? But I don't think you stop there, Drew. I think you take it a step further. I think you make an actual plan of how the hell do you get these loans out of your life as fast as possible. I'm a huge proponent of that. Hannah and I paid off our student loans and generally our non-mortgage debt in about 18 months because we built a plan to do so. And I think it's very important because it's really easy, Drew, to say, okay, I'm going to pay off my loans as fast as possible. Let's just say you have a $500 monthly payment and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to put $200 extra each month and then see what happens. Well, it's really easy to be like, well, this month I'm not going to do 200, I'm going to do 50 because, this thing popped up, or I've got a wedding to go to, or whatever it actually the event is, or the thing you want to buy is. It's really easy to do that. Well, for Hannah and I, because we had built such a strict plan of, okay, we know we're putting this amount of much, we have to put this much money towards our loans so that we can get out of debt in 18 months. We knew that that money was not spendable, and then we lived on the rest. And so whatever that looks like in your situation, I think it's hugely important to figure out those types of plans, because I think that the whole student loan crisis, it is a crisis and there's multiple parties to blame, but you can only look at your own situation. And I think it's, it is time for a lot of people to start taking responsibility for those loans and start getting them out of their lives, because trust me, it's so much more freer once you get them out of your life, because you're, one, can invest that money, and two, you just don't have that weight on your shoulder, man. Like I tell you, when Hannah and I paid them off, it's like free, and like, hey, now we can go out and do the things we want to do and not have to worry about paying back for school that we did, 2, 3, 4 years ago, or whatever it was.
You wonder if people have got that taste of what it's like to have those student loans gone after this like 2 year period. Having that extra cash, even if people aren't spending it the right way, it kind of, you'd think, would be an eye opener of saying, if you do get these student loans paid off, this is how much extra money that you can kind of play around with at
Do you
the end
think
of the
they
month.
think that though, or do you think it's the opposite, where they're like, oh man, it's so nice to live this way, maybe I can pay less on my loans and not even care about them? Because it's hard to like backtrack, right?
It's a good pot. I mean, that's a good thought on it too. Like, it, I guess everybody's a little different. If you're somebody that's really not wanting these loans to come back on, and you're just trying to, kick the can down the road, you probably are in the more mindset of what you just said there, of just saying, "Oh, I'll just pay less on these because I've actually been able to go out to eat, or I've been able to go to a concert," and just having uh, that extra spending money in the present, and not really thinking about the future. Because if they were to put that money towards that loan and you got it done in a couple of years, it's done with. But right now, as we said, it could be potentially just kicking the can down the road, and those loans will probably just never go away, and there's hoping that they're going to be forgiven one way or the other.
I mean, if you look at how, so the student loan forgiveness program was a program that was established, I don't know, a decade ago, more than a decade ago now. And it was a way for public service people like doctor, nurses, etc., to be forgiven their loans after they work for 10 years. Well, how that thing was implemented was a mess, where at the end of the first 10 years, it was like a 97, 98, 99% rate of people getting rejected in that program. And so it's crazy to think that, like, as an individual, you would rely on your government to help you out. And I know there's a lot of stuff that has gone in there and it's very nuanced, and I understand all of that stuff. But to rely on like the government to come out and say, hey, we're going to forgive your loans, I think that's a really tough situation to be in. And I think it's, at the end of the day, they're your loans, and there's some responsibility there for you to pay them back. And I think right now is a really good time to, like I said, build that plan, figure out how you can get those things out of your life, and truly be free of student loans. And you can expand that out to other debts if you like.
This time right now might not be the worst time to not only look at your budget, but maybe it's a time to look at your job too. One of the ways that you can cut out this student loan faster is to increase your income. I think it's so often of just find a way to really restrict your spending to fit within your means. But there's nothing stopping you from increasing your means. And if it is something with student loans, for example, then you may be more marketable right now to go out and try finding a better paying job. And just because you're in a job right now doesn't mean you have to retire at that job. If you want to build your career, it doesn't have to be with one company. If you like it, that's good. But it might not be a bad time to just see what else is out there and see how competitive you can be with other companies. And if you do really like your company, still look at these other ones, because if they can be paying more, you then have leverage as an employee to go to that employer and say, this is what I could be making over here. Uh, So what can we do to make this work that I don't have to leave this company? And with that extra income, then that could go towards those student loans, and you could still be living the same way. So like any amount of raise that you get, that could just go strictly towards your student loans, and you wouldn't have to worry about changing the way you lived.
I absolutely love focusing on increasing the income side of the house, not just strictly looking at the expenses. Because at the end of the day, Drew, the more money you make, the more money you can use to pay off loans, to invest, to live maybe a little bit higher of a lifestyle, whatever it is. You can't do that without increasing your income because you can only cut expenses by so much. There's a basic amount of money you need to live, and you can't go any lower than that. So increasing your income, wholeheartedly agree with you that that is one of the major ways to focus. But I also think that you need to focus on the expense side too, especially for student loans, because I think most people can get student loans out of their life in 12 to 18 months. I'm a firm believer of that. Obviously, there's going to be people out there that have hundreds of thousands of student loans, and it's not going to be easy to or possible from a math standpoint to get out in 18 months. But so I think looking at the expense side and getting on a plan like the debt snowball or the debt avalanche, which if you guys don't know what those are, go ahead and Google them. I don't think, Drew, we want to get into that here today, but those are two different types of payment plans to get out of debt. And I think that they are absolutely fantastic. We use the debt snowball, and it worked really well for us. And like I said, it got us out of debt in 18 months. And so I think you kind of couple the two, the increase in the income side with decreasing expenses and getting on that plan so that you can pay off those loans as fast as possible and not have to rely on the federal government saying, you know, you're going to have to start paying again in 2 weeks. Oh, by the way, we're going to extend it. Oh, by the way, we're going to extend it. And you just don't live in this life of uncertainty. Now, don't get me wrong, it's perfectly okay to take advantage of these extensions depending on your situation. And maybe you will say, okay, well, I'm going to take advantage of the extension, and rather than give the federal government my money for the loans, I'm just going to stockpile it in a savings account. So then when they do resume payments, you can just be like, bam, pay it off, wipe your hands clean, and just be done with it. And you don't actually even have any stress from like, are they going to resume payments? Because you got the cash there, but you're just sitting it in your own account just in case something were to happen. So maybe you can kind of think of it as like a beefed up, huge emergency fund that part of it's going to go directly towards loans once those things start resume, or once those things do resume the payments.
Yeah, I would not put all my faith into the government, especially the federal government. If it's these loans that are yours, it's time to take things into your control as much as possible. And I think we've said that similarly to Social Security in some past episodes where, if it's there and it's supplemental, that's good, that's a bonus, but your retirement, your loan should be taken in control by yourself. Like you don't want to be waiting on somebody else, because if they keep kicking the can and you're still waiting for them, not only is it just pushing things down the road and making things longer and worse, but mentally it's draining. If you are excited for something to come up and the day comes and you just get shut down on it, it just beats you down. And I think it's really uh emotionally tough, not only just physically. So I think by taking these loans into your own control, these retirements into your own control, your budgets, your household, anything like that, that's our duty. I think is really taking our hands. And if if somebody wants to have a helping hand, whether that be the government, family member, whatever, I think that's a bonus and that's very awesome. And I would never turn that down. But I think you have to just start with, you have your plan that's going to be in your control. You're not going to be let down. If you are, it's just going to be in yourself. It's not going to be somebody else's fault. It's going to be yours. And I think that has to be an important factor in looking at not only these loans, but just everything else.
Yeah, I mean, you remove the uncertainty of it all. And Drew, as you were talking there and you say, you know, take it into your own hands, it's so true. If you think about like things that you accomplish in life are so much more rewarding when it's you that is a person that accomplishes it. And yes, obviously you're always going to have help in different ways from other people. But if you're given something, that is far less rewarding than you actually achieving whatever the task is, whatever the goal is. And I think student loans play right up in there. Hannah and I, we were going to do the loan forgiveness program where you got your loans forgiven, or at least hers. Mine, obviously, not, because I'm in the private sector. But we decided, like, hey, like, this is our responsibility. We decided to take all this stuff out. We didn't want to live the life of uncertainty. And so we just got them out of our lives. And I think right now we're in the same place of people, the government keeps pushing them off. And so there's the uncertainty. Who's to say if there's going to be loan forgiveness or not? And I just think that even if they come out and say, we're going to forgive $10,000 of student loans for everybody. And that's kind of, Drew, where I think is going to end up landing. And maybe we can get there in a little bit around like the timing of that, because I think there's a lot of politics involved there. But even if they come out and say, we're going to forgive $10,000 per borrower, and you already paid off your loans and you don't get that money, who gives a shit? Like, yeah, $10,000, don't get me wrong, that's a lot of money. But you still paid off your loans. You took control of your own life, and you decided to make a plan, stick to it, and achieve that goal. You can make $10,000. So I just think that at the end of the day, sure, you might miss out on loan forgiveness, but who really cares? Like, you did a thing, you paid back your loans, you made the commitment. And I think that is worth more than 10 grand. And you should definitely be proud of it if that's a decision you make.
Okay, so I got something here. So remind me here as we're going forward to say something about what's something rewarding. So I'm going to go to that, but I'm going to go
What's
back.
rewarding, did you say?
Yeah, I'm going to have something that like is rewarding. So that, and then going back from a little bit what you're saying, I have a prediction because I felt like we had a bold prediction last episode that came true, and that was talking about in the Inflation Reduction Act. They're talking about there's a $7,500 tax credit if you bought an EV, electric vehicle, and as about as soon as it gets signed in, Ford and GM were having battery issues, and they increased all their EVs by that credit or more. So I think we called that was going to happen in our episode. And so that
heard it here first.
Heard it here first. So the other bold prediction is, if you're saying it's going to be landing around this $10,000, and I think that's what a lot of people have been seeing in articles, my prediction is if that does come true, there's going to be a lot of fine print into that. So it's only going to be for a small group of people, but it's going to be pushed with a narrative on a bunch of media that's going to say that they're getting rid of $10,000 of student loan debt for everybody. And it's not going to be necessarily that. Like, as you said, with the forgiveness for those 10 years thing, like 97% of those people got denied that. I think that will be probably similar to this, where they say, hey, we got something passed that we're going to forgive $10,000, but below that's going to be, but you have to fit within this parameter, and you have to do this, and you had to go here, and you got to go there. So it's really not even going to be for that big amount of people, but they're going to look at it as some big win until you're somebody looking at your loans thinking that you're going to be forgiven for, and it's not.
See, Drew, I think that it's going to go across the board. I truly believe that if they end up going with loan forgiveness, it's going to go across the board up to, like, I don't know. There's going to be an income limit for sure. Put it at $200,000 per year, whatever that income limit is. But I think it's going to be across the board. And here's the reason why. And so I said a little earlier, I think there's going to be, well, obviously everything's politically motivated, but this is an election year. I don't know if you know that, Drew, by the fact that, one, your brother's running for state representative, and two, you're seeing signs and all the bullshit of election years out there. But I do think that this student loan stuff is going to play a huge role into the November election. Let's be honest, the left, the Democrats are hurting right now when it comes to reelection. And I think if they pass a sweeping X amount of dollars of student loans, that's going to look really good for them. So I think there's going to be a benefit to it. Unfortunately, it holds people off in the balance, and that's why I freaking hate politics. And I don't like to get into it in this podcast, but I'm getting fired up right now because student loans is a passion of mine, and it does obviously, like if you guys have listened to earlier episodes, I've talked a little bit about my story with them, but I think that is going to be a pawn in this political game. And that's why I think, Drew, there's going to be a sweeping X amount of dollars of forgiveness because they're going to want to have power and retain it. And it's unfortunate that they hang, the average person out.
Well, I think that's why I don't think we're too far off. Where it is going to be a pawn, it is going to be used for election clout, but it's going to be something so close to the elections where nobody's going to actually be able to look into it. So people are going to feel good about that.
Oh,
And the only
sure.
way to get something like that passed with all the spending that's happened in the last 2 years is for it to be within a strict parameter. And that's why that's my prediction, where it still will be a pawn, but it would be closer to the election time where people don't have actual time to look into the details of it. So they'd be happy that they're going to be forgiven for $10,000, but they're going to come to find out that they don't qualify. Most people don't qualify for it.
I feel like we're on the same page with slightly like we're almost there, and then we fork at the very end. So we'll see. We'll keep tally on who's more right.
Bold predictions here.
I think that we're both on the same page. Like we're on the same. We'll be right in some way, shape, or form, but we're going to see how those details play out.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I go back now to my original thought before we got off onto that tangent, how things can be more rewarding when you take them into your own hands. And the only example, I mean, not the only, but one of the simplest examples I can think of. The
single example in this entire world is right here, folks.
Yeah, single one. Only thing but cooking. I honestly believe, like, when I make noodles from scratch, like just flour, eggs, some olive oil, whatever, and I eat those noodles, they are so much better. But if somebody gives them to me at like a free buffet, I'm throwing away half the plate of spaghetti and I'm putting way more on than I need. If it's my made, I eat it well, I take care of it, I have like no wasting of it. And that's like the simplest form of just, when you actually put the time into it and some, thought, some love, some sweat, some tears. Not saying I cry while I make noodles, but if you're chopping onions, you might be crying. But I honestly think like that's like such a small thing. And like when you actually do that, you can take care of it. You have pride in it. I think that's like so important. So like as you use that mentality towards paying down a student loan, a car loan, your finances, whatever, it is so much more rewarding. And you're very proud of that. And that pride is very contagious, not only for others, but for yourself, where you just constantly want to make yourself better. You want to learn and you want to just keep things predictable within your control. And it's not easy all the time, I'll tell you that. But it's much more rewarding, I think, at the end. And, this isn't money wise, but I told my wife I was going to be on a kick for a while, so people just have to get used to it. When I was putting in the air conditioner, I didn't think I could do it. I did it, and I've been proud of it. So I normally don't brag and tell people a lot of things, but I've been just like, hey, do you know I put in an air conditioner? And I just feels like really rewarding, and I've just slowly wanted to do more now, like whether it be around the house or whatever. And that's the same way with like money too.
I was wondering where we were going to go with that noodle analogy, but I liked it. It ended up being pretty decent, Drew. I'll give you that. I liked it because it is true. When you do things yourself, it is much more rewarding, even though an alternative might be free or it might, you might make money or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like that.
You don't take care of it as much.
That was a good one. Exactly. And regardless, Drew, maybe we can wrap up this segment, but regardless of what happens here in the next couple of weeks, I think regardless, it's a good time right now to sit back and say, hey, I've got these obligations out there. I have not been paying them for the last couple of years. What's my plan to get back on track if they resume payments in 2 weeks? And then how do I make sure that I can get these things out of my life and not have to have them just hold over on my shoulder, hold over my head, or whatever it might be, whatever the correct phrase is for the rest of my life. So I think right now, Drew, is a really good time and hopefully after this episode, you guys can just sit back and say, okay, I've got these loans. Here's my plan. I'm ready to rock and roll. And then you can adjust come in 2 weeks if they don't resume payments. Maybe you don't pay the government. Maybe you just, like I said, put it in a savings account or put it off to the side and start stacking that cash so that you can pay down the loans when they do resume those payments at some point in the future, if they ever do. Who knows?
Yeah, as you're saying, like kind of wrapping up this type of a segment, I think the main part really was when I saw this. I don't think I haven't really seen it on much news at all, and my initial thought was reading the headline is we could have an episode kind of just like a public service announcement. Like we should let people know as a reminder, like this is something to look forward to. We also want you to not be completely worried because we think this will be extended here. But if you're listening to this when this comes out on Monday, you're having, about a week and a half or, week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it is, to figure it out. But we think it will get extended. So we want to give you some ease there. And if it didn't get extended, they already have things in place where they're talking about you would have till about next August to figure out a payment plan if you're not able to afford it right now without it really affecting your credit score or anything. So, kind of wrapping the segment up again, it was just really, we wanted to give a reminder for people that this is something that's coming up because I haven't really seen it anywhere else. So if it's something that somebody's forgot about, this is a time to start making your plan. And fortunately, you probably don't have to be extremely worried, but it is a time where it should be somewhat of a wake-up call to say, I haven't been careful with my money these last 2 years. I kind of have to figure something out. So when this deadline happens again, I'm good to go. It's no worries whatsoever.
So, Drew, it is everyone's quote unquote, you and mine probably, favorite segment of the Neighborhood Money podcast, and that's Retweet of the Week. You got a tweet for us this week?
I do. So I'm going to say what it is. I'll talk about it. And then I'm going to try sharing my screen. And maybe we're able to pop it into the podcast. I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's
for sure. If not, you can just send me a screenshot and I can throw it in there. That's what I did last week.
Or if not, we'll just cut it out. Doesn't matter. But so the as you know, Cavan and I like cryptocurrencies. We like Bitcoins, we like digital currencies, and the central banks want to make potentially a digital currency called this CBDC, so the central bank digital currency. And there was a
creative,
yeah, and there was a meme out there that had, if anybody's Star Wars fans, young Anakin Skywalker and saying CBDC 2022. And then on the other side, it had Darth Vader, which is Anakin is an older adult, saying CBDC is in 2047. And then above it says same energy. And I think it's kind of funny. So it's like they're trying to make it like it's going to be really cute and really good in the beginning. It's going to be the best thing ever. And then at the end, it's going to be just the worst thing to happen to the world. So
are you opening the door for a little rant here? Because I feel like you and I could go off on our thoughts of a CBDC. Because it's not good from my standpoint.
I don't like it at all. We can definitely go on a rant. I'm trying to share my screen right now, and I don't know if it's popping up. So,
all right,
it probably won't.
I'll start.
It probably
on my
won't
thoughts.
work.
Oh, we'll see. We'll see.
Oh,
there you go.
There you go. So you're probably gonna have to just like crop this a little bit so it doesn't show like all my bookmarks or whatever. But yeah so this is it. The same energy. Anakin, Darth Vader, CBDCs 2022, 2047. So I thought it was hilarious because it's true. I hate CBDC. I don't like the central bank having digital currency. It scares the living heck out of me.
So why is that, Drew? Why does this scare the living hell out of you?
Well, as we talk with Bitcoin, we love the decentralization of it. We like the peer-to-peer. I don't want the government all of my business. With the central bank digital currency, it will then be owned by something. It will be more of a security. It will be something that can be manipulated. It can be something that can be restricted. It can be censored. And not only that, but with a central bank digital currency, they would know every single little thing that you do or could question. So they really want the most tax dollars out of everything. I think they get way more tax than they should. I feel like I pay a shit. You know, I feel like I pay a lot of taxes, and uh, with these, it's not necessarily the millions and billionaires that they're worried about to get the money from. It's a lot of the middle class. It's a lot of the people that tend to do a lot of cash transactions. It's something that uh, they, I don't know, just peer to peer stuff. And with this central bank digital currency, they would just know every little thing that you do. They know every nooks and cranny. They would be able to, I don't know, there's just way too much information that they would be in your life, and I want less government, not more. So
Yeah, I think my biggest concern with the CBDC is the fact that they can monitor every single payment that happens with CBDC. And sure, maybe that doesn't mean much to a lot of people because most people are spending their money on mortgage, going to the grocery store, going on vacation. But if you play it out, Drew, and you look at what happened up in Canada with the truckers, that could happen here at any time, depending on whoever's in charge, right? And the scary thing is that with the CBDC, they could technically say, okay, you live in this house, you can't spend your CBDC outside of a 10-mile radius. And so now you are limited to that 10-mile radius. Obviously, you can go outside of that, whatnot, but you can't buy gas or you can't get a hotel room or food outside. So that's obviously very doomsday-ish, and I typically don't like to go down that path, but you never know. And so I don't like the idea. And this is my big thing about US dollars right now is the fact that it is controlled by the US government and it's manipulated by the US government and the politicians that are in place on both sides of the aisle that only benefits a certain few and it really hurts the vast majority. CBDC is no different. It's just digital, but it does give increased amount of surveillance, increased amount of control on the money that you have. And so that's why I'm such a huge proponent of Bitcoin because you have the digital currency, you have the security of Bitcoin's blockchain, but then it's not controlled by any given person, body, entity, no one. It's really the money of the people. It's made so that no one can manipulate it. CBDC. So maybe that gives a little more context to the fit picture and why Drew and I absolutely love it because Anakin was just like this up and coming, really nice little kid, and then turned dark and to Darth Vader, who then was trying to control the galaxy, right? And I forget all of my Star Wars lore off the top of my head, but it was the bad guy, right? The villain. And I totally can see CBDC going down that route over time.
yeah, it's scary stuff. Like, so when you're saying, you know, it was like doomsday ish for you to look at a, a governing body to restrict where you use or spend something. And, I don't think for one it's that far fetched, but say that is doomsday ish. And then we look at the side. So that's one end of the spectrum. Then there's like the shining star that it just makes everything super smooth. It's super easy. They have access to it, but they really don't look at it. It's just pretty much like using a credit card for all your transactions. You never have to worry cash or coin around. And it's just a little bit cheaper to use. So there's that side of the spectrum. So then you have to think there's something in the middle there. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. So it's not going to be the best thing ever, and maybe it's not all that doomsday-ish, but if it's somewhere in the middle, that means there's going to be some type of restriction, some type of regulatory piece of that. And if somebody wanted to end up weaponizing that, and maybe this goes more doomsday-ish too, but just like talking about like political stuff, like
Yeah.
if you were to like be donating to somebody and they're like, oh, we don't like that. We're going to freeze your account so you can't actually donate to that person. And that might sound doomsday-ish, but as we just said, that legitimately just happened up in Canada with the truckers.
Yeah.
So it's
Or they
like,
might just not even let you send the money in general. Like they might put a restriction on someone else's account, right? Like it's
yeah.
kind of the same thing, but
Or
it's
they
yeah,
might be saying, we're going to hold every single one of your paychecks until, if you did something illegal, or let's hold all your paychecks until you come compliant on something. It's like, oh, you didn't go renew your tabs. We know that because you didn't spend any of your digital currency on this, but you're spending on other things. So we're going to lock up all your money until you go pay for that. And I don't think that's too far fetched by any means. So, you know, not saying Bitcoin's the only thing or will ever be the only thing, but the fact that it's decentralized, I think, is the biggest part of it. Because as we already know, when we went from the gold standard, which was still could be manipulated, being as like a commodity and seen with big money purchasing that up, going to pretty much a faith-based monetary policy with our
yeah,
cash
a
that gets
military
that
base
that gets
basically.
that gets manipulated, and then now you're going to go to another central bank currency. Why would that one not be manipulated? So having a governing body over that, I don't think is what we need. We need something that's not governed, that's going to be uncorruptible, that's going to be censorship proof. Like I don't think the more I've looked into Bitcoin, the more you realize that your money isn't really your money. Like your property isn't really your property. But with Bitcoin, if you buy it decentralized and you have it your own keys, it's yours. That's like one of the only pieces of property that I can think of that's like actually yours. You're gonna say the money in your bank account is your money, and I would argue that it's not, because if they want to freeze your bank account, if there's gonna be a bank run, they'll just say like you can't take your money out, and that was happening in like what's that, Sri Lanka or whatever. I mean that was just happening a couple weeks ago there, and so this is kind of like one of our rants here, but as far as as far as currency goes, CBDC, I hope never gets passed because I don't think it would be good.
And it will. I mean, there's no way that it won't, right? Because
Some form of it.
the federal government's going to want to control the global currency because it benefits the United States. Let's totally be honest, right?
Yeah.
It benefits the United States to have the currency of the world, and a CBDC would lead that into the digital age. But
Yeah. And they
that
might
doesn't
pass
get
it
rid
through.
of,
And they
yeah,
could pass
they
something
might
like
pass it
they
through.
could pass something through that as like a small Trojan horse. Like if they just have to get their foot in the door. They can get their foot in the door with saying, "Hey, like we're still like, don't worry. Like you can, if you want to spend with cash, you can pay with cash. You want to pay a credit card, you can still pay a credit card." But that's how the foot gets in the door. And then it could be as easy as what they did when the gold standard went away. They said, "You have by this date to give all your gold to us and cash in for this. Otherwise, uh, you will be a criminal." And they could
Exactly.
easily do that with cash.
Exactly. And so, who's to say what's going to happen? I fully believe that CBDC will come out, um, and it will be, or at least attempt to be, the main currency. I'm a believer that there'll be a dual currency. It'll be Bitcoin and CBDC going forward, long term, not anytime soon. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see, Drew, where that plays out.
Weren't they talking about maybe building that on the Ethereum chain?
Yeah,
Or
I
is I
don't
just,
know
or is
if
I just
there's
like
been
hearing that? I
I
kind
don't
of
know if there's been any like definitive communication from the Federal Reserve on what the CBDC really looks like. I know I've heard that they are looking into it and there will be more information by like 2024, like more definitive information by then. So you're talking like a 10-year plan here to potentially have CBDC out there.
Yeah, I mean,
So
let's
whether
be
that's on
honest. The government
Ethereum or
works really
whatnot.
slow, and they tend to be
Yeah.
pretty far behind on technology. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
they are still trying to figure out what to do with Facebook type of ads
Yeah.
and that type of data collection. So, as far as the digital currency, there'll be a lot of paperwork and a lot of voting and a lot of things to get ironed out before that even comes to fruition, in my opinion.
So, Drew, to move similar vein, not Bitcoin or crypto, but still on the money side, my retweet of the week's from Clark Howard, who's a big time blogger, financial guy. And he had a tweet on the 16th, and it says, homes depreciate over time, not appreciate. So, obviously, people think that buying a house is an investment. Then he continued with, people think that a home increases in value, but it's actually the land that a house sits on that may well increase in value over time. The house itself, the structure, requires continual tender loving care, maintenance, and repair. And so I think the only reason I brought that one up is because I always hear people say that get a house, it's a good investment. Don't rent, you're throwing away money. Where I think people always forget to look beyond just the amount they're paying in mortgage, insurance, and taxes compared to rent. There's so much more to a house with repairs, maintenance, just improvements, furnishing the house and all that stuff, that you can't look at it as an investment. Well, it's more of like a forced savings account, if you will, if anything, that probably provides a negative return. But I really like that one. I thought it was good because it's a good reminder of, if you're putting all your eggs in your basket and that basket is your house for your retirement plan or for your long-term plan, it's not a very good plan. You need to do more beyond that because, like Clark said, it doesn't appreciate over time. It actually depreciates when you're looking at the entirety of your property and house.
There's that side of depreciation, and the side that I think about, and I can't remember what podcast I heard it on, but it started because of all this inflation, and I've probably said it before already in previous episodes, but it's not the amount of your property appreciating, it's the amount of your value of your dollar depreciating. And that's like what inflation does to that. It takes away the buying power of your dollar. So it doesn't necessarily make your house more valuable, it makes your dollar less valuable. But the thing is, also with inflation, if you have the debt out on these types of properties, the one positive side with inflation is that it eats away at your debt, because that 100, 200, $300,000 loan that you took out 10 years ago is actually buying power wise much cheaper. So there's that side of it too, which is kind of interesting, and that kind of just goes into more inflation stuff that I listened to another podcast, and they bring up your thoughts of, when you look at, I think, inflation as a whole, as not what the CPI says. I think a lot of people say, so the Fed will say over the last, their goal is always 2-3% inflation. I think it was probably, consistently around probably 10% inflation. And the reason I say that is when you look at like equity prices in the S&P 500, they always say, oh yeah, over the lifespan, you could average about 10% per year. And then that makes me like go into thinking that when you're making these 10% gains, and compounding, it's like that's just you breaking even. And that's just really crazy to me to think about, is that this money that you put in slowly and consistently, it's not necessarily you're making all this money off it. It's like you're just keeping up with inflation year after year.
Yeah, that's interesting. If you dissect that a little bit, I agree with you to an extent that 10% is kind of like the actual inflation, but that's the asset inflation side, right? So if you invest into like S&P 500 and you can expect 10% per year, that's kind of your baseline. So that's how much assets are going to grow over time. Whereas if you look at like your personal inflation, it's going to be much less than that, right? Because you're accounting a majority is like your housing costs, your energy costs, and your food costs. And generally speaking, on average, you're going to be less than that. And so, to an extent, I agree that the 10% is like your baseline, but that's really on the asset side of the house. Whereas if you get more granular if you look at your individual situation, you're probably going to be below 10, but I guarantee you're probably above the 2 to 3 target that people are, or that the government's actually shooting to get to. You're probably sitting like at the 5-6%, if I'm going to guess.
Yep. And then you have wages that don't keep up with that either. So
Well, that's been true for decades.
yeah. So There's a little rant. Retweet of the week. It's a good segment. I'm liking it so far.
Drew, it is finally that time of year where the Stackpool clan meanders their way down to Milwaukee for the annual Irish Fest. And I could not be more excited to get on the road tomorrow and go listen to Irish music for the next 2 days, because it is one weekend of the summer that I definitely look forward to every single year.
Weren't you sending some snaps? I thought you were at Irish Fest last weekend.
Oh, no, Drew. August is Irish month, if you didn't know. So Irish Fair in St. Paul is always the weekend before the Irish Festival in Milwaukee. So we always hit up back-to-back weekends of Irish extravaganza.
But as you said, fantastic. As you said last week, no Guinness though in Milwaukee though, right?
They had Guinness in St. Paul. Big fan of that. Big fan of that. But yeah, in Milwaukee,
Irish car bombs.
No, I've got kids, man. I got kids. I can't do Irish car bombs.
I'll ask again. Any Irish car bombs?
I thought of that when I was there, because I haven't done an Irish car bomb since college.
I don't know the last time I've done one.
So for people that don't know what that is, it's like a half a Guinness. You drop a shot of, I think it's
like a Jameson. Wouldn't it be like an Irish whiskey?
Well, no. I think it's Irish cream with Jameson on it. So like it's not just a pure shot of Jameson. Right. I think it's some sort of Irish cream, and I'm getting that part wrong because it curdles if you don't drink it fast enough. So it gets all chunky. So you just have to slam like, gosh, what is it, like 10 ounces of liquid as a shot? Just perfect.
Yeah, I have not done one of those. Like, I honestly don't remember the last time I've done one of those. Maybe it was college. So you probably should do one this weekend. Or you can.
Yeah, no.
There's no Guinness.
Yeah, I don't think Milwaukee, at least in the past, has not had Guinness. They usually it's a Miller Lite territory, so it's always just like Miller Lite, Leinenkugels. And then they have I forget what the cider is, but Reds has been there in the past.
How did the kids do at the St. Paul Festival?
Oh, they love it. They both love live music. It's like our son, our oldest, he absolutely just adores live music, like asks to go to live music frequently throughout the week. And so he was fired up to go. He's fired up that we're going this weekend to Milwaukee. Our youngest, she doesn't really know all that much about like what's going on in life yet, but she does enjoy when she's at music watching. And there's some pretty stinking cute photos of her or videos of her clapping along to the music. And so that was pretty fun to see her actually like being interactive with what's going on. But no, they do generally really well. And so I'm pretty excited to spend 2 full days at the Irish Fest in Milwaukee. Usually it's blistering hot, but I think this year the forecast says
your dad and brother's going
overcasty. Dad is. My brother is heading out to Costa Rica for coaching basketball for 6 days.
Wouldn't be the worst place to go coach some basketball, huh?
Wouldn't be the worst, unless you don't like heat, which he may or may not like.
I think I've become much more fond of heat the last couple of years. I don't know what it's like. I love fall in Minnesota. I love fall.
Yeah.
But I think I like summer just a little bit more. And
I love heat if I don't have to like be dressed up and worry about sweat showing through my clothing.
Yeah. Like if you can just be in like swim trunks or just t-shirt or something. You don't have to be like in a suit or something. Yeah. I agree with that. I agree with that side of it. Winter, like way too long for me. Spring, I don't know. I've just never been a fan of spring. It's just way too dirty. But it's
just too muddy out there. I always tell Hannah that spring smells like dog shit.
It does smell like dog shit.
And she just doesn't get it. I'm like, how? You like walk outside and it just like reeks of like, of just poop everywhere.
Yeah, you've just been having hibernated dog turds for like the last however months, 6 months.
Yeah.
And they're just starting to come thawing out and being awake.
Yeah.
And then
they're just waking up.
And like
right
no,
into your
and a lot of those
nostrils.
people don't pick up dog shit during the winter
No,
time, so
no,
it's like turned into just mounds of dog poo
exactly,
that's now
exactly.
melted out and everybody sees it, and now you just start smelling. It's like the fact that Hannah didn't smell dog doo doo
Yeah,
in the
and then
spring is
you
like
mix that with
wild.
like the mold and the dirt and all the nastiness that's
Yeah.
under the snow. It's just
What, does your nose not work?
the only good thing I will say about springtime is that you get to like that 20 to 30 degrees and it starts feeling like super warm and you can like wear a sweatshirt outside. You flip that into the fall and you're in like a parka, winter coat, snow pants,
I
boots.
know.
So that's like the only part I like about spring is the fact that like it's getting warm. You get the sweatshirt on. You're ready for like patio time in the summer or late spring. Crack open beers outside. That's the only good thing about spring. Everything else, I'll hard pass on it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm trying to think if there's much going on over here. Really, not much. There's a Brewfest in Virginia, Minnesota. That is
I know I saw
this
that.
weekend.
Kind of wanted to attend, but obviously I'm not going to be around.
Yeah, I went. I didn't go the last 2 years. I went the couple years before. It's always pretty fun. So I think we'll be in town this weekend. So we'll probably make a
There's like
little.
40 vendors, isn't there? Like there's
I
quite
don't
a bit
even know.
of
There normally is quite a bit. I didn't even look. I'm sure it gets bigger every year.
yeah.
Would be my guess. So yeah, we'll go to that. I think that should be pretty fun. They usually have some like food vendors and it's fencing area. I think they have some live music and you just go
Maybe some
sample a
Irish
bunch of.
car bombs. Who's to say?
I don't know if there's any hard booze there, but maybe I could sneak that in.
Isn't Oh, I
Because
suppose
it'd just be like
you do need
beers,
some
I
hard
think.
booze. Yeah.
I mean, you could go find probably a stout in there, and then maybe you don't have cream, but maybe. I've been on a big Jack Daniels kick lately. I've been they like I always felt like Jack Daniels was like cheaper, shittier whiskey, and I just have a lot of memories of having it in college with like Jack and Cokes. And I went to the Jack Daniels distillery like 2 years ago, and I was like, "Well, it's really cool, like the whole history behind Jack Daniels," but still kind of had the, you know, Jack and Coke thought in my mind. And then I just picked one up the other day, just like, oh, I'm just gonna try it like on the rocks or neat or whatever. And I've been on like a really big Jack Daniels kick. Like that's like good whiskey. Like I don't know why I thought it was such a shitty whiskey, but
Yeah. It's
it's
not
like
bad.
it's tasty. Like
It's not
and
bad.
it's a Tennessee whiskey, which is pretty much the same thing as a bourbon, but it's filtered through charcoal. And I
I
don't
didn't
know.
know that. Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know why I've been on a kick of that. So I've had a couple nightcaps and stuff like that.
Since we're on the alcohol train, last weekend they had some Irish cream at the St. Paul Irish Fair. I believe the brand is called Hard Cha. I could be wrong on that, but it's very similar to a Bailey's. So it's an Irish cream. However, it's got 50% more alcohol than all the other. So I think it's like 50 proof or something like that. And so if you're looking for an Irish cream with a little bit more kick to it, it wasn't bad. And it wasn't like when you drink like a vodka or a whiskey or whatever it is, it doesn't have any of that burning sensation, but you can just tell there's some alcohol in there, whereas like a Bailey's, you don't really notice it all that much. But it wasn't bad. And like I was telling people, I'm like, I would still probably choose Bailey's over it. But if I'm looking for like a Irish cream coffee and I needed to get rolling in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with the hard shot. So
I haven't
if
had
you see
one of
that in
those
the
in a
liquor
while.
store, check it out.
I haven't had any of that type of like cream in my coffee. I like my coffee black, and
Same.
I normally don't put any creamer in it. So like I see a lot of people like if we're be at a hunting shack or up at the cabin,
Yeah.
a lot of people like just putting that in their coffee in the morning. And for me, I just feel like it kind of ruins coffee. I just want it black. I want some hot bean water, and that's about it.
Yep. I love me some hot bean water, except I will say, and Drew, I don't know if you remember from a year ago, I made this same proclamation on the podcast, but I do love some pumpkin spice in my coffee in the fall.
You do like that.
Big fan of that. Big fan of that. So I'm excited for that. I actually probably is already out. I haven't been to a coffee shop in a long time, but we'll have to maybe on the way to Milwaukee this weekend swing through the Starbucks or Caribou, see
Well,
if they got the pumpkin spice latte.
so
out
you
in
don't
order.
embarrass yourself anymore. I think people don't want to hear us ramble anymore, so I think I can wrap up this episode so you don't have to hear any more about that pumpkin spice. So
Delicious.
so for anybody that forgot, wanted to give a little PSA on student loan payments potentially would be resuming here in 2 weeks at about like the beginning of July here of 2022. Our thoughts were pretty positive that this will be extended again, so I wouldn't have extreme fear about it. If it does, there would be potentially ways for you to get payment plans set up by between now and next August. But we think this will get extended, and we just want this to be a reminder for people that do have student loans or have people are listening to this that have family members that have student loans to give that reminder to say, what have we been doing with that extra cash these last 2 years? Should we be able to be setting this aside so when these do resume, we're good to go? These are things that we should start thinking about here in the next coming weeks here. So we hope this was informative. We hope you guys like our little bit of rants or retweets of the week. CBDC are not good as our thoughts, but let us know what you guys think about that. And with everything else said, we will see you guys next week in the neighborhood.